What's the most awkward, negative, or plain crazy response you've gotten after performing a good deed? In the summer of 2003, I threw a big party at my parents' house. They were on a cruise, but knew about it, and I rented a roulette table. Party was great, a good time was had by all, and the next day, I had to put the table in my truck and return it. I get to the highway exit, which is a very steep and long curve, and as I get halfway up, I see a broken down Buick with an older woman at the wheel still in the exit. I pull over and want to get this car off the road because it's only a matter of time before someone plows into her. I approached the woman, told her my concerns, and offered to push the car while she steered to get it off the ramp. I'm a big guy, 6'5" and 280 at the time, but I was having a near impossible time getting this Buick uphill. Shocking, right? Thankfully, a Samaritan pulls over and without a word helps me the rest of the way. Super guy, so now that the vehicle was out of danger, I offered the lady a ride to a Holiday Inn that was just off the exit. I said you can call for help and at least sit in a comfortable air-conditioned lobby while you wait for help. She agrees. Along the short way, she asks me if I'm religious. I replied that I'm Jewish, but not extremely religious. It's more of a cultural thing. She says, well, I want to give you something, and reaches into her purse. Oh no, she's going to try to give me money. How do I refuse this, I think. That's when the religious pamphlets started coming out, including a copy of the Watchtower. Thankfully, I managed to pull up to the hotel at that point. I told her that I was comfortable with my beliefs as they were, told her to have a nice day, and drove off to return to the roulette table. I wonder if she tells stories of the nice heathen Jew with a gambling problem at church. So the roulette table giveth, and the religious pamphlets taketh away. Truly a balanced universe. Story 2. Raked and blew the leaves off a friend's yard because they were starting to blow onto her neighbors recently, cleaned and mowed immaculate years. Said neighbor came out and screamed at me that she had just gotten her yard worked on and I had better not mess it up. I explained that I was doing a good deed for a friend that was mostly a benefit to her, the neighbor, but all I got was, I don't give a damn, for a reply. 2 years later, said neighbor's husband gets cancer and loses his income and they fall into financial trouble and have to lay off their lawn service and their lawn goes to crap. I took the opportunity to, again, do the right thing and started to maintain their yard and continue to this day for free. The gratitude on this lady's face when I see her is priceless. We never bring up what she did to me, but I know she remembers. I can still hear my late mother saying, end 'em with kindness, Chris, end 'em with kindness. Story 3. I was driving home from university one day and I stopped for a red light. I looked around and caught eyes with an older gentleman in the car next to me, and we both snapped our glances forward as if we had caught each other looking at Johnson's in the men's bathroom. I sheepishly looked back at the guy and we caught eyes a second time. I waved, he laughed, and waved back. Awesome, why don't I do this more often? I spent a week waving at people randomly and being super friendly. It was 11 in the evening and I was walking back to my car in a friend's apartment complex. An older man walked by and I took a brief moment to greet him. Good evening, sir. And he responded, oh God, please don't hurt me. I was so taken aback by his response that all I could do was stare. He cried, I have a family, they need me, please just let me go home. I told him to have a nice night and I never talked to strangers ever again. Story 4. Just a weird situation, really. I was visiting New Orleans and was taking a walk around the French Quarter at around 5 a.m. I hear someone yelling at me, hey big man, wait. I turned to see this old homeless guy with a ball cap wobbling towards us with haste. I'm more curious than nervous as I am 6'7" and this guy was all of 5'3". He says, mind helping me out with something? He looks kind of desperate but friendly. I say that I'll help him and ask what he needs. I'm a bit nervous now because I have no clue what he's going to ask for my help with. He whips out a bottle of gin and says that he can't get the lid off. I open his gin and he thanks me profusely, saying that this day is now going to be much better. Story 5. I just gotten off work and was headed to a local tavern before class. At an intersection, I noticed a 40-ish-year-old black woman in a nurse's uniform pushing her car up through the intersection in the middle of downtown and start heading up a hill. I thought for a brief moment and did an illegal U-turn in the middle of the road to come back and assist her in pushing it partway up the hill and into a parking lot that was about 75 feet away. I'm an electrical engineer and I was wearing my work clothes, which consists of a button-up shirt with geek paraphernalia in the left pocket, driving my 2011 black Camaro. I'm 6 feet tall, about 225 pounds, and have a very deep voice. I pulled up behind her and turned on my flashers for safety and got out of my car. The look on her face was of utter fear. I, in the most calm voice I have, mentioned that she was pushing her car up a hill and I was more than happy to assist her in getting it to the parking lot. She was shaking like a leaf, and through her shaky voice, she mentioned that her husband was on his way several times. I could see that I was terrifying this lady for some unknown reason, so I apologized and wished her a good day, hopped in my car, and headed to the tavern. I'm still at a loss to this day as to what the heck had happened. Story 6. My buddy and I decided to go to Boston Market one day for lunch. As we were walking in, a young woman was also approaching the door from another direction, and as we reached the door first, my friend held the door open for her. She stopped, looked him up and down, and went, "Thanks," as indignantly as she possibly could, and walked through the door and into the entryway. She then opens the second door, bows and motions for my friend to walk through and goes, "Here, good sir, let me get that for you," in what can only be described as a sarcastic tone. I've never wanted to punch a woman in the face so bad in my life. Story 7. I was waiting in line to do a return at a department store. A little boy, probably about 3, 4 years old, stood a bit away from the registers, crying and calling for his mommy. I looked around trying to spot mommy, but didn't see any adults paying attention to him. After about 5 minutes of this, I went and asked him, "Hey, honey, are you okay? Let me see if the checkout lady can call your mom." I gestured for him to follow me, didn't touch the kid. The cashier paged the mom, who came almost immediately and was thankful. After the mom left with the boy, the cashier and the 2 customers in front of me in line chatted about how worried they were that I might have been taking him. I was standing right behind them. Story 8. I was bartending at a private event and found a purse that someone had left on the bar, so I tucked it away behind the register. Towards the end, I heard a lady complaining about it being stolen and how there was a lot of cash and valuables in it. I then returned it. She was lying about the cash. She tried to write me a check for a reward, which I declined, asking only that she someday pay the good deed forward. The next day, she went on Yelp and wrote this huge review claiming that the bartender attempted to steal her purse, and the only reason she got it back was because of how vocal she was about it and that I got scared. Story 9. My good deed was nothing extreme, but here goes. I was in the cafe of my college about to get some hot water in my thermos when I noticed someone standing behind me. Now, since I had previously had hot chocolate in my mug, I needed to rinse it out. I felt like this other person should go before me since she was merely getting hot water. I say, "You can go first. I need to rinse my mug out." She looks at me incredulously. "What did you say?" Me, "You can go first. I have to rinse my mug out." Her, in an exceedingly angry manner, "Oh, that's not what I thought you said. You should be careful what you say." What in the huh? I also found out later that this woman is a department head at the school I attend and crazy. Story 10. I was driving home around 2 a.m. and saw a car flipped in a ditch. I pulled over and a woman was inside on the phone with 911. When I asked her if she was okay, she started screaming at me to get away and not rob her. I called 911 on my cell and waited until CHP arrived. The CHP officer was talking to the woman and she started accusing me of trying to mistreat her. The officer gave me the dirtiest look ever and said, "People like you make me sick. Get the hell out of here." I couldn't believe what was happening, so I just bounced out without looking back. Story 11. I've told this story on Reddit a couple times before. In my senior year of high school, I was editor-in-chief of the newspaper. A couple weeks before school started, I held a welcome to the newspaper get-together for the new staff. We ate pizza, got to know each other, and brainstormed for the coming year. That evening, I emailed the faculty advisor of the newspaper about the party and told her enthusiastically about all the great ideas the new staff was coming up with. I was really excited and was looking forward to getting started. The next day, I got an email from said faculty advisor telling me how disappointed she was that I didn't invite her to this party, a party for students. This is a grown woman talking here, and she was mad I didn't invite her to a party with a bunch of teenagers. For this one unfortunate incident, she held a grudge against me for the entire year and admitted this to the principal and vice principal in front of me and treated me like crap. Story 12. Helped an ex-coworker put food on his family's table by establishing a small online business, bringing in about $3,500 in profit per month, split 50-50. He kicked me out and quit our day job so he can sit home and keep all the money for himself. He even intimidated my employer and attempted to sue me after I tried getting my part of the money. Right now, he's sitting home reaping money from what was mostly my work while I'm still stuck at the day job we were trying to escape together. The same day job that he quit after I established us. Sigh. Last time I reached out to help someone with a substance problem. Never again. Story 13. My son was out on our backyard deck and saw the neighbor 4 houses down lying in his backyard, mower running, guy completely motionless. He called my husband, who was an anesthetist, and my husband grabbed his emergency kit and an oxygen tank. We have all this stuff in our garage because he runs a mobile anesthesia company. Ran down the street and began trying to revive him. The wife came out hysterical, and my husband told her to call 911. He worked on the guy until the paramedics got there, then instructed them on what he had done and that the guy needed to be defibrillated. The paramedics shocked him but couldn't get him back, so they asked my husband to ride with them in the ambulance to the hospital. I know, right? And they actually revived the guy on the way to the hospital. The guy passed away the next day. The neighbors never said a word to him. They walk by our house and don't even acknowledge us. I don't know if this makes a difference, but we live in an all-white neighborhood and this guy was the only black guy on the block. His wife is even white. My husband is white too. Story 14. I'm driving to work on a snowy morning, making sure to be very careful as conditions are bad. I'm at a traffic light and when it turns green, I begin to go. A middle-aged man suddenly comes literally sprinting down the sidewalk and bursts into the road in front of my car. I slam on the brakes, tires squeal, and fortunately I stop in plenty of time as he's still a few feet from the hood of my car. He's a bit stunned, I guess, and just stands there in the road as we stare at each other for a second, and then his face twists up and he gives me the middle finger. Straight to my face for a good solid 2 or 3 seconds, then he storms off. I was too flabbergasted to even process it at the time. Man jumps into traffic, I avoid hitting him, and he flips me off. To this day, I don't know what to make of it. I bet he tells people he almost ruined his perfectly good sprint to, I don't know, wherever he was sprinting to. The audacity of the guy. Story 15. I work in retail pharmacy. A lot of people complain about us for taking so long to fill their prescriptions. We still get witched at when it takes a long time to call around to various insurance companies to find out who covers them because they don't carry their card with them, and then they refuse to go home to get it. Pro tip, we cannot magically look up your insurance information unless you are on Medicare or Medicaid. Also, don't tell us that we are incompetent when your insurance company doesn't pay for a drug. We do not determine what your insurance company covers, and we do not set your copays and deductibles. If you are nice, we will gladly reach out to your prescriber to get the prescription changed to a less expensive medication. However, if you are screaming at us, we will give the prescription back and tell you to call your doctor. Lastly, don't yell at us or get angry with us when you are out of refills. You opened up your bottle for a month that said 0 refills remaining and had a large red sticker on the bottle cap saying the same thing. Story 16. Heading into work one day, there was a dude in front of me on a big new Honda Goldwing. He seemed a little unsteady on it. It just so happened that he was going the direction I was, just he was in front. At one point, he decided the person in front of him was going too slow, so he zoomed around them and took off. I round the next big bend in the road and see busted pieces of plastic all over, and this dude way out in the ditch with his bike on top of him. So traffic is backed up and nobody is helping the dude. I pull over and run up to him and his radio is blasting gospel music. He's an older dude, a little out of shape, nose obviously broken and lips all messed up, and he just screams at me, "Turn off the freaking radio, goddammit!" So I try and figure out how the radio works, but it's not turning off, so after 5 seconds he screams, "Just leave it alone!" At that point, another woman runs up and says she's a nurse, and he says, "Which do I look like? I need a nurse, help me up." And she looks at me, and we both give each other a screw this guy shrug and go back to our cars. Fire and EMT were showing up right as we were leaving. Let the people that get paid for that crap deal with schmucks like that. Story 17. In a multi-story car park once, some schmuck had parked his bike right across the drop curb for wheelchairs. There was a couple of wheelchairs right behind me. I tried to move the bike, but it had changed through the wheels and wasn't going anywhere. So I offered to help the couple over the curb. The woman adopted a rather stern tone and said something like, "Excuse me, I've been living in this thing for years. I don't need anybody's help getting around, thank you." I didn't really know what to say, but then she apologized and said she just gets indignant sometimes that people think she's helpless. So, awkward, but recovered fast. Story 18. I bought a house about a year ago. My neighbor is an elderly single woman who seemed nice enough at first. I gave her a Christmas present, would shovel her walk when it snowed, etc. Last spring, I planted some new grass in front of my home because the grass I had was mostly ugly weeds. I even planted some new seeds in our tiny shared plot of grass. I live in a townhome, since I knew she was old and probably didn't feel much like gardening. One day, when watering the new grass, she started screaming out of the blue, "Water's getting on my grass," and that "a drop of water may hit my foot," and "don't get any drops of water on my concrete. Think of it like we live 500 yards away from each other." Since then, she has been an absolute horror, cutting down my tomatoes that were growing on her side of the fence that I earlier said she could have when they matured, screaming at my boyfriend when he attempted to mow the entirety of our shared piece of grass because it looks weird as hell when only half of 8 square feet is mowed. She even went so far as to pull weeds from her lawn and place them on top of her half of the grass so we couldn't touch it with the mower. It makes no goddamn sense, evil crony. Story 19. This was when I was still at uni. I was late working in the labs. On the way to the bus, I saw a short Asian girl carrying her bike up a flight of stairs. She was clearly struggling, so I walked up and offered her help. Suddenly, out of nowhere, this tubby white woman in her 20s rolls up and basically shouts at me, "I'm so sick of you men always assuming that we can't do anything. It's misogyny treating us like we're all weak." I was completely stunned, and I managed to stammer something about that being statistically accurate, to which she replied, "Yeah, well, enjoy your opinion, pig," and marched off with the Asian girl in tow, helping her with her bike, funnily enough. I spent the rest of the evening baffled about what exactly her problem was. Story 20. As some of you of the Midwest may know, last winter, Missouri experienced one of the most treacherous winters that we've ever faced in decades. The University of Missouri-Columbia had closed school for the first time in about 40 years due to such harsh weather conditions. One day, my friends and I were semi-stranded out at his place off campus, which is at the bottom of a slightly slanted cul-de-sac, and we noticed his neighbors having trouble with their car. We decided to be good neighbors and try to help them by pushing their cars up. So as we run out to help them, we shout a little, "Seems like you guys could use some help," flash a smile, and proceed to help them without their permission. Because who needs permission when you appear to be in genuine need of help? Yeah, this witch decides to bark back at us and say, "We don't need your help, go away." We then decided to just stand there and watch these people struggle getting up the road. Story 21. Gave a girl a ride home from a bar one night. She was completely wasted and never met me before. Nothing inappropriate happened. Fast forward about a week, she's at the bar with a guy who was clearly with her. I walk in, holding hands with my girl. She intoxicatedly pushes between me and my girl, asks me if I'm the guy that drove her home, and then hits on me clumsily while still physically pushing me and my girl apart. I tell her I have no idea who she is and slip around her to get a drink. She stumbles off, screaming about what a schmuck and a total piece of crap I am at the top of her lungs to everyone in the bar. Story 22. Once at an arcade, this kid was a few hundred tickets short from getting the prize they wanted. The parents were on the edge and just wanted to leave. I gave the kid my ticket since I don't care for the prizes anyways, and I only go to play the games. Of course, the child was happy, but the parents gave me the hugest look of disgust and left in a hurry with their child. Another time, I went out to get coffee with a few friends. The lady in front of us was short on change, so she just bought her coffee and left her lunch. Naturally, I decided to buy it for her. Once I'd given her it, she made a rather rude comment on how she doesn't like lesbians and I shouldn't expect anything out of this. I may roll both ways, but please, buying you lunch does not equal please be with me. Another time, last story for now, I was at the mall just waiting for a friend to text me back when I noticed a child wandering around looking lost. I went to go speak to them. They had been a 4-year-old boy and lost their mom quite some time ago. So I took the child to the information center, which luckily is next to the food court, bought them a cookie and smoothie, and waited for their mom to show up after the information center let out the announcement. During the wait, my friend popped up and let the kid play with his phone. After about 20 minutes of waiting, the child's mom popped up. Instead of thanking anyone, she made a huge scene and freaked out at the workers. After this, she started ranting on the snacks I bought her child, how they're not allowed to have sugar until after dinner. Honestly, lady, I'd just be glad my child was safe if I'd been you. And if you're enjoying the video so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 23. One day a few years ago, I got on a crowded subway car and was caught standing facing backwards next to a lady who was simply holding onto the handle of her luggage case as her means of stability. At the next stop, with the car braking, she started to lose her balance and was about to fall backwards before I reached my hand out to grab her shoulder. Instead of a thank you, she gave me a glare and growled, "Get the heck off me." So now, even though the subway car was packed, people around me started backing away while giving me their judgmental stares. Epilogue. So at the next stop, the subway starts braking again, and I see the lady start to lose her balance again. My instincts were telling me to reach out and help her again, but my pride was yelling, "No." My pride won, and the lady took a big dive and face planted into someone's leg. Epilogue. Even though it wasn't my stop, I got off the subway and made sure I had to step over her. Story 24. When I was a grossly underpaid public defender, I once represented a guy that was accused of participating in an organization that stole millions of dollars of frozen seafood from a distribution warehouse. There was no question of his part in the scheme as he had already given a statement, and the other 5 defendants had already all pleaded and were turning state's evidence against him. I spent almost a year of very late nights reading over thousands of inventory documents, doing my own investigation, conducting depositions, and filing motions before I was finally able to file a motion to suppress based on evidence I had found. After I won the motion, the state no longer had any evidence and had no choice but to dismiss the case. When I proudly tell the client what I had been able to accomplish, he looked at me, rolled his eyes, and said, "Took you long enough." He turned his back on me and walked away. I immediately quit my job so I could start charging those schmucks out the nose for the work I was doing for them. Story 25. I'm graduating in a few weeks and I'm in the process of moving. I noticed this kid at school who had been hanging out with my group of friends recently could really use a bike to get to and from school, given that he doesn't own a car. He had been riding my bike for a week already at this point, so I decided to just give him my well-used cheapo mountain bike so that he would have some transportation and so that I wouldn't have to drive it across the country back home. He barely bats an eye, definitely doesn't thank me. I shrug it off. At least it's off my hands. But the kicker came a few days later when my friends were all hanging out together and wanted to bike to get ice cream. Not only did he not thank me for my bike, he then uses it to ostracize me from my own group of friends. Wow, he probably thinks the bike came with a no thank you feature. It's a rare limited edition model. Story 26. In our country, it's common practice to hire household help. Most of these people come from the province, and a vast majority of them never get the chance to go to high school or college. For them, higher education is a dream they can only have for their kids. We hired a 17-year-old girl to be our maid. She was a hard worker, very personable, and quite intelligent. Her family just didn't have the money to send her to school, and they had her send all her wages back home just to survive. It seemed like such a waste of potential, so we decided to help her out. We enrolled her in a nearby school, bought her school supplies and a uniform, and worked out a schedule where she could go attend classes but still be able to do the work at home. Everything was pretty good. She graduated high school at the age of 21. On top of that, she was accepted with a partial scholarship to a business college. The per semester fees wouldn't be so bad if my dad and I pooled our money to pay for it. The only problem would be that she would need to stop sending money home since the school is relatively far, a 45-minute commute, and getting there on a daily basis would require quite a bit of money every month. Our budget was stretched pretty thin by this point. Naturally, she is ecstatic. She calls home to tell them the good news. Eventually, she comes to me with tears in her eyes and tells me that her family demanded that she go back to the province. Apparently, they never told her she could go to college and that they needed her salary more than she did. We tried to convince her to stay and that it was ultimately her choice. The family ties were just too strong. She ended up going back and forfeited what could possibly have been her only chance to get a college degree. Story 27. My stepfather's mom lost her cat last year. She was really sad about it and kept telling us how she felt alone without her dear Pico. A couple of months later, I passed by the SPCA and found a beautiful adult cat who was really affectionate. I bought a litter, food and toys, and gave it to my stepdad's mom as a surprise. The following weeks were spent receiving dozens of phone calls a day from her complaining about how much the cat was stupid, a mess, that it was all my fault, and that she would throw him in the traffic. I urged her not to do so and that I would pick up the cat the very next day. Well, guess what? The next day, the cat was gone. Story 28. My friends and I are actors, and a few months ago we went to an audition conference in North Carolina. We stayed at a friend's house the night before, and at around 7 or 8 a.m. we went to Sheetz to get some food before the auditions. A group of people there were very obviously doing the same thing we were, so my dear friend Alex, who was the most outgoing person I've ever met, goes up to them and tells each of them to break a leg. Most of them respond with thanks in turn. However, as we leave, a woman who is also here for the conference follows us out. Alex holds the door open for her and, true to his fashion, says, "Break a leg." Her reaction to this was to look him up and down, turn her nose up at him, and smirk. I've never been more stunned at a courtesy, and neither had Alex. He did not take this very well at all, so for the rest of the day, anytime he saw her, he made it his mission to destabilize her as best as he could. He accomplished this by telling her to break a leg again and again each and every time he saw her. Before her audition and after it, before her callbacks, all day long. I'd never seen a person so jumpy by one phrase. Best part, a month or so later, I saw her at a different audition conference. As I walked by her, I said, "Break a leg." As I walked away, I'm pretty sure I heard, "You've got to be freaking joking." Story 29. This literally happened just last night. A friend and I went to see a movie and were using the bathroom after. I finished first, and by the time I was done washing my hands, my friend was approaching the sink. No more than 10 seconds later, my friend walks out of the bathroom with an old man screaming at him, saying things like, "That's an ignorant leftist statement for you to say, young man," and "That's a problem with this GE generation." I asked him what happened in the 10 seconds between when I walked out and he did. He said he told the old man that the sink he was walking up to didn't work and that he should use a different one, which apparently set him off, complaining about corporations, GE, and how my friend was a liberal. Story 30. I was hanging out at my friend's house a few years ago. One of them, who was a diabetic, had just gotten home from work and went to take a nap. My other buddy and I were playing some Xbox while our friend that just got home was napping. All of a sudden, we hear some thrashing about. Neither of us thought anything about it and figured our friend woke up and was playing with his dog. At that moment, we realized the dog was laying in front of the TV and our friend was having a diabetic seizure. I ran to the fridge to get a cola and went to help our friend. Unfortunately for us, he sleeps bare, but that wasn't on our mind since we were trying to prevent a trip to the hospital. We finally get some sugar in him and he calms down. My buddy and I are stressed after dealing with the situation, so we go outside for a smoke. Our diabetic friend comes out and says, "Hey, I know you guys are trying to help, but you shouldn't bust into a dude's room when he's bare. Not cool." Our response was, "Okay, mother trucker, next time we'll let you flop around and end up in a coma, you ungrateful schmuck." Story 31. I used to pick my wife up from work on my way home from my job, and there was always a group of a few homeless people begging for change in front of her business. One time at my work, we had some big chili dog cookout for the workers, union laborers, and made way too many, so I decided to make a bunch up and wrap them for the homeless guys. It wasn't like this was fancy, but they were decent dogs, all beef, foot long, not caviar and lobster, but not too shabby. I get to pick my wife up and I run over to the homeless camp and say, "Hey guys, I thought you might want something hot for dinner." They all looked at me blankly and one said, "We're vegan." Frickin' Portland. Story 32. A couple years ago, a friend's sister was just about to fly home out of NYC with a group at the end of a church trip. She's just about the nicest person you could ever meet, one of those people that is so sweet that it makes her teeth hurt. After going through security, she noticed that the man that had been in front of her had left his watch in one of the trays. After she collects her belongings, she grabs the watch and takes off after the man to return the watch but can't find him. She returns to the checkpoint to hand it over to security and let them know what happened. When she did, though, instead of being thanked or simply told to go on her way, she was asked to follow one of the security personnel and was placed in a holding cell without any explanation. A while later, the police arrived and arrested her for theft. It turns out that the guy noticed his watch, a Breitling, missing and immediately told security that it had been stolen. When she returned the watch, the security chief opted to call the cops and just let them sort it out. Who returns a watch unless they stole it, right? Anyway, while the rest of the group flew home, she was arrested, and over the course of 2 years and multiple costly trips to NYC by her and her family, she finally saw a trial. She was found guilty of a misdemeanor and sentenced to 6 months probation, all for trying to help a stranger. Oh yeah, after her initial arrest, she was deemed a flight risk and a danger to society, and was refused bail until her family flew in and managed to convince the judge otherwise. Story 33. This will probably get buried, but when I was in college, I was eating at a sandwich shop. I had ordered an Italian sandwich, but the waiter brought me chicken instead. Famished out of my mind, I started consuming the chicken sandwich. About halfway through, the waiter brings the Italian sandwich and apologizes profusely for the mix-up. I tell him I'm fine with the chicken, but I'll take the Italian home, which is totally cool. There was a homeless guy outside, and I'd figured I'd give him the sandwich. I pay my bill, take the sandwich outside, and give it to the homeless guy. He asks what kind it is. I say Italian, and he says, "I don't like salami." Didn't even get a thank you. Story 34. About 2 years ago, I was working at a Food Avenue in Target. One morning, I opened up a Food Avenue, and a homeless man came to the counter. He was really skinny, and I could tell that he hadn't had anything to eat or drink for a while. This explains why I was also a tiny bit delusional. Anyway, he walks up and holds out his hand to show me roughly 11 cents in pennies and asks me what he can afford to get with that much. Knowing that he obviously can't afford anything, I tell him that if he can wait a few minutes, I will cook him something. I go back and make him a pizza and the biggest breakfast burrito I ever crafted. I toss it all in a bag and give him the largest cup we have for fountain drinks. The man couldn't have been more grateful and said thank you to me over and over. He tried paying me with his pennies, but instead of taking them, I emptied out my tip jar into his hands. If you didn't know already, every Target is armed with some of the best security cameras that cover the entire store. Good thing to know for those of you with sticky fingers, don't steal from Target. So I was seen by security hooking this guy up with food and my own tips. My boss came in later and confronted me about the situation. I offered to pay for the man's food, but he told me that I didn't have to because that day was going to be my last day at Target. No regrets. Story 35. Working as a valet, me and another guy were the last ones left at a very upscale, expensive wedding party that was being held at an estate. At the end of the night, a few guests who were too cheap to pay for a cab back insisted that they get a ride to their hotels. The wedding planner, who was a well-known Jewish woman who organizes Jewish weddings in Toronto, told us we needed to take them and could take them using her car and the estate owner's car. We say okay, thinking she will tip us, seeing as how our shifts ended. It was 2 a.m. We were an hour away from Toronto, and it is customary to tip valets, especially when they were doing it for frickin' free. I take them to their hotel, and the customers laugh and say, "Oh, the planner will tip you. We have no money." I say it's all right and that you don't need to tip me. I get back, and the witch not only doesn't tip us, but complains to my manager the next day that I stole $15 from her car, which obviously I didn't. Stupid frickin' witch. I hope someone who knows her reads this and tells her how freaking cheap and pathetic she was. Oh, and the whole time she was demanding us to do things like, you have to take them home since there are no cabs. More like there is no money for cabs. Story 36. I was on the GO train headed east from Toronto during the busiest point of the day, quitting time. The train was especially packed that day with all the seats full and even the aisles were full of standing people. I was there early and had a seat. 20 minutes into the trip, I noticed a woman, probably late 50s, early 60s, was literally falling asleep on her feet. I'm from a place where if you see something like that, you freaking remedy it. Turns out Toronto isn't one of those places. I got up and offered her my seat, and she got insanely shocked and uptight and just kept shaking her head no and backing away, running into people because the train was so packed. People all start looking over and trying to see what's going on. I can hear them saying crap like, what's going on? You try to do what? What's wrong with the seat? It was so weird and confusing that I just pushed my way through the sea of miserable schmucks to the door and waited there for my stop. Nobody took the seat. Story 37. Probably missed the boat in getting this scene, but I'll give it a shot. Going through my wilderness first responder training, the vascular surgeon teaching the class warned us that people in distress who have just been rescued can often act in odd and unpredictable ways. And to the extent it's possible, we need to be prepared for that. He then told a story about swimming in Hawaii when a man was drowning near him. He swam hard to the guy, rescued him despite the guy fighting him the whole way. And when he finally got him to the beach, the guy spent a minute catching his breath and straightened up, looked the rescuer straight in the eye, and punched him in the face. Even later at the hospital, when the rescuer stopped in to see how he was, the guy never thanked him, nor apologized for punching him. Doc thinks the man had no memory of even doing it. Story 38. I spend a fair amount of my time traveling from location to location doing work for customers. I was on a little road in the middle of west central Ohio in between two cities and noticed that there was a vehicle with their four ways in the middle of the road. I stopped to get out and help push the car off to the side of the road. The guy mentioned that he had run out of gas, so I offered to give him a ride in my rental to the nearest gas station. I hopped out, grabbed his gas can from the trunk, and proceeded to fill up my rental and his gas can using my card. On the way back, I had felt some grumbling in my stomach. I had Chipotle for lunch earlier in my day and then felt like I had passed some gas, so I rolled down the windows. The guy got out, the smell persisted, and in the dark, I put my hand down on the passenger seat where I now had a smelly substance on my hand. Needless to say, Hertz was less than impressed with me when I returned the car, even after I had tried everything to get the smell and the poo out of the seat. I think my use of liquid orange cleaner only made it worse. Story 39. I spent a summer in Japan living in a small city, attending school, and living with a host family. One day, I was riding the train to school. It was pretty packed since it was rush hour. I saw this old man get on, and he was flanked by a bunch of young guys around my age in suits and sunglasses. Didn't think much of it at the time. Anyway, he got on, and he was looking for a seat. Nobody was making eye contact. They were just ignoring him. I got up and offered him my seat. He accepted and sat down. Later that day, when I got back from school, my host's father told me he found out I gave that old guy my seat. Turned out that the old guy was a retired Yakuza, and now they owed my host family a small favor to pay back my generosity. Story 40. I saw a young girl on the ski slopes completely alone and crying. I stopped by her and called for my friends to stop, but they thought I had gone ahead and went past me. I asked the girl where her mother or father was, and she said she didn't know. She had last seen her mom further up the hill. There are two ways to get where we were. Come straight down, which is a much harder run than going around. Where the two meet there is a flat path that leads onto another run, but straight ahead is a big hill, and at the bottom is where I found the girl. This girl was no more than 6, and her parents should not have taken her down the way they went, because it's a seriously tough run, but that's irrelevant. I took off my skis, stood them up, planted my stocks in the snow, and carried this little girl's skis and stocks uphill about 50 meters. We get to the even spot where the hard run meets the easier run, and the little girl points and says, "There's my mom." I look up to see a woman struggling down the slope with her skis. I run up to her and take her things and ask, "Is this your little girl?" while helping her down. Without even looking at me, she shouts, "Of course, that's my freaking kid. What the heck do you want?" When we get down to the even bit, I call some people over and ask them to call ski patrol. I waited with the girl and her mother until help arrived. The mother had torn a ligament fairly badly, they thought, and they took her to the clinic. She didn't say anything to me apart from shouting. I got back to the flat around 6:30 p.m. It was minus 10 degrees Celsius outside. I had just turned 14. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.